The blood in the snow was what caught Willa Emerson's attention first. Bright crimson drops leading off the trail into the dense pine forest, where the wind howled through branches laden with ice. It was December of 1882, and the Montana Territory winter had come early and harsh, turning the world into a frozen expanse that seemed determined to kill anything foolish enough to wander too far from shelter. She had been gathering firewood near her small cabin when she spotted the trail, and something in her chest pulled tight, urging her to follow despite the bitter cold that made her fingers ache even through her thick gloves. The whimpering reached her ears before she saw the source, a pitiful sound that made her heart clench. There, caught in a rusted steel trap half hidden beneath a dusting of fresh snow, was a wolf pup. Not more than a few months old, its gray and white fur matted with blood where the trap's teeth had bitten into its front leg. The animal's golden eyes looked up at her with a mixture of fear and desperate hope, its small body trembling from pain and cold. "Oh, you poor thing," Willa breathed, dropping to her knees in the snow without thinking. She was 22 years old, had been living alone in this cabin since her father died 2 years prior, and had seen enough death and suffering to last a lifetime. But there was something about those eyes that reached into her chest and refused to let go. The pup growled weakly when she reached toward it, but the sound held no real threat. Willa pulled off her scarf and wrapped it around her hand for protection before carefully examining the trap. It was an old design, probably set by one of the trappers who worked these mountains, forgotten or abandoned when the trapper moved on to better territory. Her fingers worked at the mechanism, but the metal was cold and stiff, and the pup's blood had frozen in places, making everything slick. "Hold still, little one," she murmured, her breath forming clouds in the frigid air. "I am trying to help you." The sound of hoofbeats made her look up sharply. A rider was approaching through the trees, and Willa's hand instinctively went to the small pistol she kept in her coat pocket. Living alone had taught her caution, especially with the rough men who sometimes wandered through these parts looking for easy prey. But the man who emerged from the tree line did not look like trouble, though appearances could be deceiving. He sat tall in his saddle, his broad shoulders covered by a heavy sheepskin coat, his dark hair just visible beneath his wide-brimmed hat. His face was weathered by sun and wind, strong-featured, with a jaw shadowed by several days' worth of stubble. When his eyes met hers, she saw they were a startling shade of green, clear and direct. "You need help with that trap." His voice was deep, carrying easily through the cold air. He was already dismounting before she could answer, moving with the easy grace of someone who spent most of his life on horseback. Willa hesitated, then nodded. "The mechanism is stuck. I cannot get it open." He knelt beside her, and she caught the scent of leather and wood smoke. Up close, she could see he was probably 25 or 26, with fine lines at the corners of his eyes that suggested he smiled often, though his expression now was serious as he examined the trap. "Nathan Lawson," he said, not looking up from his work. "I have a ranch about 5 miles south of here. These traps have been a problem all season. I have been pulling them up when I find them. Willa Emerson." She watched as his gloved hands worked the mechanism with practiced efficiency. "I live in the cabin just over that ridge. I know." At her sharp look, he glanced up with a slight smile that made something flutter unexpectedly in her stomach. "Small territory. I have seen smoke from your chimney. Been meaning to ride over and introduce myself, make sure you were not having trouble." Before she could respond, the trap suddenly gave way with a metallic click. The pup yelped and tried to scramble backward, but Nathan's hands were already there, gentle but firm, holding the animal still while Willa carefully freed its injured leg from the trap's jaws. The damage was bad, but not as terrible as it could have been. The pup's leg was torn and bleeding, but the bone seemed intact. Willa pulled the scarf tighter around her hand and carefully scooped the pup into her arms. It struggled weakly for a moment, then seemed to sense she meant no harm and went still, its small body shaking. "I need to get him back to my cabin," Willa said, already turning. "Clean the wound, see if I can save the leg." "I will help you." Nathan's tone left no room for argument. He picked up the trap with one hand, his face hardening as he looked at it. "And I will make sure whoever set this knows to check their lines more often or stop setting them altogether." The walk back to Willa's cabin took 20 minutes, with Nathan leading his horse behind them. The animal was a beautiful chestnut gelding with kind eyes, well cared for and calm. Willa found herself acutely aware of Nathan's presence beside her, the way he moved to block the wind when it picked up, how he kept glancing at the pup in her arms as if to make sure it was still breathing. Her cabin was small but well maintained, a single room with a stone fireplace, a narrow bed in one corner, a table and chairs, and shelves lined with her father's books and her own small collection of herbs and medicines. She had made it home through sheer determination and hard work, and she felt a flash of pride as Nathan looked around with what seemed like approval. "Put him on the table," she said, moving to stoke the fire higher. "I need hot water and my medical supplies." They worked together with surprising ease. Nathan seemed to understand what she needed before she asked, holding the pup still when she cleaned the wound, fetching clean cloths and her precious bottle of carbolic acid for disinfecting. The pup whimpered and tried to snap once, but Nathan's low, steady voice seemed to calm it. "Easy there, little wolf. We are trying to help you. You are going to be just fine." Willa's fingers worked quickly, stitching the worst of the tears with careful precision. Her father had been a doctor before they moved out here, and he had taught her everything he knew before fever took him in the winter of 1880. She had kept his instruments, his books, his knowledge. They were all she had left of him besides this cabin and the small plot of land surrounding it. When she finally tied off the last stitch and wrapped the leg in clean bandages, she was exhausted. The pup had gone limp, either from pain or exhaustion or both, its breathing shallow but steady. Willa looked up to find Nathan watching her with an expression she could not quite read. "You have a gift," he said quietly. "I have seen men with medical training who could not work half as clean or quick." Heat rose to her cheeks, unexpected and unwelcome. "My father taught me. He always said healing was about steady hands and a calm heart." Smart man. Nathan glanced toward the window where the light was already beginning to fade. "It is getting dark. Do you have somewhere safe to keep the pup? Somewhere warm?" Willa looked around her small cabin. There was not much space, but she had a wooden crate near the fireplace that she sometimes used for storage. She emptied it quickly, lining it with an old blanket and placing the pup inside gently. The animal's eyes opened briefly, looking at her with what might have been trust before closing again. "He needs to stay warm and quiet for at least a few days," Willa said, more to herself than to Nathan. "I will need to change the bandages daily, make sure infection does not set in. If he survives the next 48 hours, he has a good chance. Then I will come back tomorrow to check on him." Nathan was already moving toward the door, but he paused with his hand on the latch. "And to make sure you are doing all right, a wolf pup is not an easy patient, even one this small." Willa wanted to tell him that she did not need help, that she had been managing alone just fine for 2 years. But something stopped her. Maybe it was the genuine concern in his eyes. Maybe it was the loneliness that sometimes pressed down on her in this isolated place. Maybe it was simply the memory of how capable his hands had been, how steady his presence. "All right," she heard herself say. "Tomorrow." His smile was like sunlight breaking through clouds. "Tomorrow, then, Miss Emerson." After he left, Willa stood at the window and watched him mount his horse and ride away through the gathering dusk. The snow was falling again, soft flakes that caught the last light and turned the world silver and blue. She pressed her hand against the cold glass and wondered what she had just agreed to. That night, she barely slept. Every sound the pup made brought her out of bed to check on him, to make sure he was still breathing, to offer water from a cloth dampened in melted snow. The animal was weak but stubborn, lifting its head occasionally to lap at the moisture she offered. Each time, Willa felt a small surge of hope. Nathan arrived just after dawn, riding through the fresh snow that had fallen overnight. He brought supplies: a sack of oats, dried meat, fresh bread wrapped in cloth, and a bottle of what turned out to be honey. "For the pup," he explained, setting everything on her table. "Honey mixed with warm water can give him energy. My mother used to do it for sick animals on our ranch back in Texas." "You are from Texas?" Willa asked, surprised. She busied herself with checking the pup's bandages to avoid looking at Nathan directly. There was something about him in the morning light, with snow melting in his dark hair and his green eyes bright, that made her heart beat faster. "Originally, came north 5 years ago looking for better grazing land, found a good piece of property and built it up from nothing." He crouched beside the crate, reaching out to let the pup sniff his fingers. "Always wanted my own place, my own herd. Texas was too crowded, too many big ranchers squeezing out the little ones." The pup's nose twitched, and after a moment its small pink tongue came out to lick Nathan's finger. Willa watched the interaction with fascination. The animal should have been terrified of humans after what happened, but somehow it seemed to sense that Nathan meant no harm. "He likes you," she said softly. Nathan looked up at her with that smile again, the one that made her stomach flip. "Animals can tell when someone has a good heart. Or maybe he just knows I am too foolish to hurt anything that cannot fight back." They spent the morning tending to the pup together. Nathan proved to be patient and gentle, holding the animal while Willa changed its bandages and cleaned the wound. The injury looked better already, less angry and swollen, though she knew infection could still set in over the next few days. "What are you going to do with him?" Nathan asked as they sat at her small table, sharing the bread he had brought and cups of strong coffee. "Once he is healed, I mean." "You cannot exactly keep a wolf as a pet." Willa wrapped her hands around her cup, letting the warmth seep into her fingers. "I know. I thought perhaps I could release him back into the wild once spring comes, if he survives that long. That is months away. A lot can happen in that time." The weight of his gaze made her look up. There was something in his eyes, something that made her pulse quicken. She realized suddenly how close they were sitting, how intimate it felt to be sharing breakfast in her small cabin while the world outside remained frozen and white. "Are you saying you think he will not make it?" she asked, her voice coming out softer than intended. "No." Nathan leaned back in his chair, his expression serious. "I am saying that nursing a wild animal through a Montana winter is going to be hard work. You should not have to do it alone." "I have been alone for 2 years," Willa said, a defensive edge creeping into her voice. "I know how to take care of myself." "I am sure you do." He held up his hands in a gesture of peace. "I am not trying to insult you, Miss Emerson. I am offering to help. That is all." She studied him for a long moment, trying to understand his motives. Men did not just offer help without wanting something in return, or at least that had been her experience. But Nathan's face was open, honest, without the calculating look she had seen in the eyes of other men who had come sniffing around her cabin over the years. "Why?" she finally asked. "Why would you do that?" Nathan was quiet for a moment, turning his coffee cup between his hands. "Because I know what it is like to be alone," he said finally. "And because that pup deserves a chance. And because—" He looked up, meeting her eyes directly. "Because I think you could use a friend, and so could I." Something in Willa's chest loosened, a knot she had not realized she was carrying. She thought about her father, about the 2 years since his death spent in near isolation, except for the occasional trip to town for supplies. She thought about the long winter nights when the wind howled and the loneliness felt like a physical weight. "All right," she said, the word coming out as barely more than a whisper. "Thank you." Nathan's smile was worth every moment of uncertainty. "Then I will come by every day to help. We will get this little wolf through the winter together." And so began a pattern that would change everything. Nathan came every morning, riding through snow and wind and bitter cold. He brought supplies and firewood, and together they tended to the pup that Willa named Silver for the color of his coat. The animal grew stronger day by day, his leg healing cleanly despite her fears of infection. But more than that, Nathan and Willa grew closer. They talked while they worked, sharing stories of their pasts. She learned that Nathan had left Texas after his father died, unable to bear staying in a place filled with memories. He learned that Willa had come west with her father when she was 16, fleeing a stepmother who made their lives miserable after her own mother died. "She wanted the house," Willa said one morning while she fed Silver small pieces of dried meat. "My mother's house, the one she grew up in. When my father inherited it, she could not stand that I was there too, so we left, came out here to start fresh." "Do you regret it?" Nathan asked. He was sitting on the floor near the crate, his long legs stretched out, watching her with those steady green eyes. Willa thought about it. "No. We had 6 good years together before he died. He was happy here, free, and he taught me to be independent, to rely on myself." She smiled sadly. "I just wish he had not left quite so soon." Nathan reached out and covered her hand with his. The touch sent warmth racing up her arm. "I am sorry you lost him, but he clearly raised a strong, capable daughter. He would be proud of you." The words brought unexpected tears to her eyes. She blinked them back, embarrassed, but Nathan just squeezed her hand gently before letting go. The moment passed, but something had shifted between them, something tender and new. As the weeks went by and December turned into January, Silver grew stronger and more playful. He began to walk on his injured leg, though he still favored it. He followed Willa around the cabin like a puppy, and he greeted Nathan's daily arrivals with excited yips and a wagging tail that made them both laugh. "He thinks he is a dog," Nathan said one afternoon, watching Silver pounce on a piece of cloth Willa had tied into a knot for him to play with. "You have domesticated a wolf." "Not domesticated," Willa corrected. "Healed. There is a difference. When spring comes, he will remember he is wild." But even as she said it, she wondered if it was true. And more than that, she wondered if she wanted it to be true. Silver had become a companion, a presence that made the cabin feel less empty. And Nathan had become something she could not quite name, something more than a friend but not yet spoken aloud. She caught herself watching him sometimes, noticing things. The way his hands moved when he worked, strong and sure. The way he tilted his head when he listened to her talk. The way his eyes crinkled when he smiled. The way her heart seemed to beat faster whenever he walked through her door. It terrified her. One evening in late January, a blizzard hit with a fury that took them by surprise. Nathan had stayed longer than usual, helping Willa repair a shutter that had come loose in the wind. By the time they realized how bad the storm had gotten, the world outside was a wall of white, the wind so strong it rattled the cabin's walls. "You cannot ride home in this," Willa said, looking out at the blinding snow. "You would freeze to death before you made it a mile." Nathan looked conflicted. I cannot stay here, it would not be proper. Proper does not matter when you are dead, Willa said sharply. You are staying. You can take the bed, I will sleep in the chair by the fire. Absolutely not. If I am staying, I will take the chair. They argued about it for 10 minutes before finally agreeing that Nathan would sleep on the floor near the fireplace, wrapped in blankets. It was not ideal, but it was better than him freezing to death in the storm. That night was strange and intimate in ways Willa had not anticipated. She lay in her bed listening to Nathan's breathing, to the crackling of the fire, to Silver's soft snores from his crate. The storm howled outside, but inside the cabin it was warm and safe, and she felt something she had not felt in years. Not alone. Willa. Nathan's voice came soft through the darkness. Yes, thank you for not letting me leave. She smiled into her pillow. You are welcome. Thank you for being stubborn enough to help a stranger with a wolf pup. His laugh was quiet, warm. Stubborn runs in my family. My mother always said it was my worst and best quality. Tell me about her, Willa said. Your mother. And so, through the long hours of the storm, they talked. Nathan told her about growing up in Texas, about his mother who could rope a steer as well as any man, and his father who had taught him to read from a single battered copy of Shakespeare. Willa told him about her own mother, who had died when she was 10, and how her father had never really recovered from the loss. He loved her so much, Willa said softly. I do not think he ever stopped loving her, even when he married my stepmother. I think he was just lonely and made a mistake. Do you believe in that? Nathan asked. The kind of love that lasts even after death, Willa thought about it. I want to. I think part of me has always wanted to believe that kind of love exists, but I have never seen it for myself. Maybe you will, Nathan said, and there was something in his voice that made her heart skip. The next morning the storm had passed, leaving the world buried in fresh snow. Nathan helped Willa dig out her door, and then they stood together in the bright, cold sunlight, watching Silver bound through the snowdrifts with the exuberance of a creature finally feeling healthy again. I should get home, Nathan said, but he did not move. He was standing close enough that their shoulders nearly touched, their breath forming mingled clouds in the air. Yes, Willa agreed, but she did not want him to go. Nathan turned to face her, and suddenly the space between them felt charged, electric. Willa, He stopped, seeming to search for words. I have been coming here every day for 6 weeks now. At first it was for the pup, but somewhere along the way it became about you. Her breath caught. Nathan. I know this is fast. I know we barely know each other. But I cannot stop thinking about you, about this. He gestured at the cabin, at Silver playing in the snow, at the world they had been building together without either of them quite realizing it. I have been alone for a long time, Willa, but when I am here, I do not feel alone anymore. Willa's heart was pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it. I feel the same way, she whispered. I did not want to. I told myself I was fine on my own, but every day when I hear your horse, my heart. She pressed a hand to her chest, feeling the wild beat beneath her palm. You have become important to me, too important. Nathan reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and cupped her face in his gloved hand. Nothing could be too important, not this, not you. When he kissed her, it was gentle and questioning, a promise and a question all at once. Willa's hands came up to grip his coat, pulling him closer, and the kiss deepened into something that felt like falling and flying all at once. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Nathan pressed his forehead to hers. I am courting you, he said firmly. Officially. I will do this properly, Willa Emerson. I will come by every day. I will bring you gifts. I will ask permission to kiss you before I do it. She laughed, the sound bright and happy. You just kissed me without asking. Then I will start now. His smile was brilliant. May I kiss you again? Yes, she breathed, and he did. The rest of the winter passed in a blur of happiness Willa had never thought possible. Nathan came every day, just as he promised. They tended to Silver together, watching as the pup grew larger and stronger, his leg healing until he barely limped at all. But more importantly, they built something between them, something solid and real. Nathan brought her gifts: a bolt of calico fabric from town, a book of poetry, a delicate silver chain that had belonged to his mother. Willa cooked for him, shared her father's books with him, taught him the plants and herbs she used for medicine. They talked for hours about everything and nothing. They stole kisses in the snow, by the fire, in the doorway of her cabin when he arrived and when he left. And slowly, carefully, they fell completely in love. In late February, Nathan took her to his ranch for the first time. It was a beautiful piece of land, rolling hills and good grazing, with a sturdy log house and a barn that could hold 50 head of cattle. His herd was smaller than that, maybe 30 animals, but they were healthy and well cared for. "I built most of this myself," Nathan said as he showed her around, pride evident in his voice. "The house took me 2 years. I wanted to do it right." Willa looked at the house with its solid construction and the touches that showed someone had cared. Window boxes that would hold flowers in summer, a wide porch, a door that fit perfectly in its frame. "It is beautiful. You should be proud." Nathan turned to her, his expression serious. "I built it thinking someday I would have a family to fill it, a wife, children. I had almost given up on that dream until I met you." Her throat tightened. "Nathan, marry me." The words came out rushed, almost desperate. "I know it has only been 2 months. I know it is fast. But I love you, Willa. I love your strength and your kindness and the way you fought to save a dying wolf pup in the middle of winter. I love how you look in the morning light and how you laugh when Silver does something foolish. I love everything about you, and I do not want to wait to start our life together." Willa's eyes filled with tears. She thought about her father, about how he had told her once that when you find the right person, you just know. She thought about the empty years after his death, the loneliness that had seemed like it would never end. And she thought about Nathan, about how he had appeared in her life like an answer to a prayer she had not known she was praying. "Yes," she said, her voice strong despite the tears streaming down her face. "Yes, I will marry you." Nathan let out a whoop of joy and swept her up in his arms, spinning her around until they were both dizzy and laughing. When he set her down, he kissed her with a passion that made her knees weak, and Willa kissed him back with everything she had. They were married in March, in a small church in the nearest town. Willa wore a dress of pale blue calico that Nathan had bought for her, and she carried wildflowers that were just beginning to bloom with the early spring. Nathan wore his best suit, and when he saw her walking toward him down the aisle, the look on his face made her feel like the most beautiful woman in the world. Silver came too, though he had to wait outside. The wolf pup had grown considerably, nearly full-sized now, and Willa knew their time with him was limited. Soon spring would fully arrive, and Silver would need to return to the wild where he belonged. But for now they were a family, husband, wife, and one rescued wolf. They spent their wedding night in Nathan's house, which was now Willa's house too. Nathan carried her over the threshold despite her laughing protests, and they christened their marriage bed with a tenderness and passion that left Willa breathless and amazed. "I love you," Nathan whispered into her hair as they lay tangled together afterward. "I will love you until the day I die and beyond." "I love you too," Willa whispered back, pressing a kiss to his chest where his heart beat strong and steady beneath her lips. "You saved me, Nathan Lawson." "You and Silver both." "You saved yourself," Nathan corrected gently. "You just let me help." In April, when the snow had mostly melted and the world was turning green again, they knew it was time to let Silver go. The wolf had become restless, pacing the cabin, whining at the door. He was nearly a year old now, fully grown, his injured leg completely healed. And though it broke Willa's heart, she knew they could not keep him captive any longer. They took him deep into the mountains, to a place far from any trap lines or human habitation. Silver followed them willingly, but when they stopped and Nathan opened the rope that had been looped loosely around his neck, the wolf seemed to understand. "Go on," Willa said, her voice thick with tears. "You are free, Silver. Go find your pack." Silver looked at her with those intelligent golden eyes, then at Nathan. For a long moment, none of them moved. Then the wolf stepped forward and pressed his nose against Willa's hand, a gesture of affection and gratitude. He did the same to Nathan. And then he was gone, bounding off through the trees with the grace of a wild thing finally returned to where it belonged. Willa sobbed against Nathan's chest, and he held her tight, his own eyes wet. "He will be all right," Nathan murmured. "You saved him. You gave him a chance at life." "I know," Willa said. "It just hurts." "Love always hurts a little," Nathan said, "but it is worth it." And it was worth it. Over the following years, Willa and Nathan built a life together that exceeded both their dreams. The ranch prospered, growing larger as Nathan proved himself to be an excellent cattleman. Willa used her medical skills to help their neighbors, becoming known throughout the territory as someone who could doctor both people and animals. In the winter of 1883, Willa gave birth to their first child, a son they named Thomas after Nathan's father. He had his father's green eyes and his mother's determination, and from the moment he was born, Nathan was completely besotted. "He is perfect," Nathan whispered, holding the tiny baby with the care of someone handling the most precious thing in the world. "You are perfect. Our family is perfect." Willa, exhausted but happy, smiled up at her husband. "Our family is just getting started." 2 years later, they had another son, James, who was quieter than his brother but just as loved. And then, in 1888, a daughter named Rose, who had her mother's dark hair and her father's smile. They filled Nathan's house with love and laughter, with the chaos of children and the warmth of family. And sometimes, on clear nights, they would see a wolf silhouetted against the moon on the ridge above their ranch, and Willa would smile and know that Silver was still out there, still alive, still wild and free. On their 10th anniversary, Nathan took Willa back to the spot where they had first met, where she had found Silver bleeding in that trap. Spring had turned the place beautiful, with wildflowers blooming and birds singing in the trees. "You remember?" Nathan asked, his arm around her waist as they stood together in the dappled sunlight. "Of course I remember," Willa said. "That was the day my life changed, the day you walked into it and refused to leave." "I had no choice," Nathan said, turning her to face him. "One look at you, determined and fierce, fighting to save that pup, and I was lost. I just did not know it yet." Willa reached up to cup his face, her thumb tracing the familiar line of his jaw. He had a few more lines around his eyes now, and his hair was starting to show hints of gray, but to her he was as handsome as the day she met him. More so even because now she knew every part of him, inside and out. "We should thank that pup," she said with a smile. "He brought us together." "He did," Nathan agreed. "And wherever he is now, I hope he is happy. I hope he found his mate and had pups of his own. I hope he lived a good, long life." "Me too," Willa whispered. They stood there for a long time, holding each other, remembering the desperate, lonely people they had been and marveling at the happy, fulfilled people they had become. Their children were back at the ranch with a trusted neighbor, probably getting into some kind of mischief. The cattle needed tending and there was always work to be done. But for this moment, They had each other and the memory of where it all began. "I love you, Willa Lawson," Nathan said, kissing her softly. "Thank you for saying yes to me all those years ago." "I love you too," Willa replied. "Thank you for being stubborn enough to help a stranger with a wolf pup." He laughed, the sound rich and warm, and kissed her again. And in that moment, with the sun warm on their faces and the sound of the wind in the pine trees, Willa thought about the blood in the snow that had started everything. About the tiny, wounded creature that had brought her the greatest love of her life. About the lonely cowboy who had stopped to help and stayed forever. She thought about fate and chance, and the mysterious ways that life could change in an instant. And she was grateful, so deeply grateful, for every moment of it. Years continued to pass, marked by the changing seasons and the growth of their children. Thomas grew tall and strong like his father, eager to learn the ranching trade. James showed an aptitude for books and learning, reminding Willa of her own father. And Rose was a perfect blend of both parents, fearless and kind, always bringing home injured birds or lost kittens for her mother to tend. "She is just like you were," Nathan said one evening, watching their daughter carefully bandage the paw of a stray dog she had found. "Same big heart." "She has your stubbornness," Willa replied with a laugh. "That poor dog did not stand a chance once she decided to save it." The ranch continued to thrive. Nathan expanded the herd and built additional barns. Willa established a small clinic in one of the outbuildings, where people came from miles around for her healing skills. They hired a few ranch hands to help with the work, young men who respected Nathan and admired Willa, and who often stayed for Sunday dinners filled with laughter and stories. On quiet nights when the children were asleep and the work was done, Nathan and Willa would sit together on their porch, watching the stars and talking about everything and nothing, just as they always had. Sometimes they spoke of their dreams for the future, of the legacy they would leave their children. Sometimes they simply sat in comfortable silence, holding hands, needing no words to communicate what was in their hearts. And sometimes they would spot a wolf on the distant ridge, and they would both fall silent, watching, wondering if it was Silver or one of his descendants. They never knew for sure, but it did not matter. The wolves were out there, surviving, thriving, just as they had helped one small pup to survive all those years ago. In the summer of 1895, they celebrated their 20th anniversary with a party that brought together everyone they had helped or befriended over the years. Their children, now nearly grown, helped organize the event, and the ranch was filled with music and dancing and joy. As Willa danced with Nathan under the stars, her head resting on his shoulder, she felt a deep sense of peace and contentment. This was what happiness looked like, she thought. Not perfect, not without struggle or sorrow, but real and earned and cherished. "What are you thinking?" Nathan murmured, his breath warm against her ear. "That I am the luckiest woman alive," Willa replied honestly, "that I would not change a single moment of our life together." "Not even the hard parts?" Nathan asked. They had faced their share of challenges over the years, harsh winters, lean times, a prairie fire that nearly destroyed everything, the death of Nathan's mother 2 years prior. But they had faced it all together, and that had made all the difference. "Not even the hard parts," Willa confirmed, "because they made us stronger, they made us who we are." Nathan pulled back just enough to look into her eyes. Even after 20 years, the love she saw there still made her breath catch. "You made me who I am," he said softly. "Before you, I was just a man with a ranch. Now I am a husband, a father, a part of something bigger than myself. You gave me that, Willa. You gave me everything." Tears pricked at Willa's eyes, but they were happy tears. "We gave it to each other," she whispered. "And I would do it all over again in a heartbeat." They kissed then, long and deep, oblivious to the cheers and whistles from their guests. Let them see, Willa thought. Let them see what true love looks like. Let them see what is possible when two people choose each other every single day. As the party wound down and their guests began to leave, Thomas approached his parents with a shy smile. At 18, he was nearly as tall as his father, with broad shoulders from years of ranch work. "Pa," he said, "there is something I want to talk to you about." Nathan raised an eyebrow. "What is it, son?" Thomas glanced at a pretty young woman who was helping her family load their wagon. "Emma Patterson. I have been courting her for a few months now, and I think I am ready to ask her father for permission to marry her. But I wanted to talk to you first, make sure you thought I was ready." Nathan looked at Willa and they shared a smile of understanding. Their boy was growing up, starting his own love story. "Do you love her?" Nathan asked simply. "More than anything," Thomas said with the earnest intensity of young love. "She makes me want to be a better man. She makes me happy just by existing." "Then you are ready," Nathan said, clasping his son's shoulder. "And yes, you have my blessing. Just remember what I have told you. Love is a choice you make every day. Some days it is easy, some days it is hard. But if you keep choosing it, keep choosing her, you will build something that lasts." Thomas's face lit up with joy and relief. He hugged his father hard, then his mother, before running off to catch Emma before she left. Willa watched him go with tears in her eyes. "They grow up so fast," she murmured. "They do," Nathan agreed, pulling her close. "But that is how it should be. We raised them right, Willa. We gave them roots and wings. Now we get to watch them fly." In the following years, they did exactly that. Thomas married Emma in a beautiful ceremony, and they built a house on the far edge of the ranch property, starting their own family. James went east to attend university, studying medicine, following in the footsteps of the grandfather he had never met. And Rose, fierce and independent, announced at 16 that she wanted to study veterinary medicine, to care for animals the way her mother had taught her. Nathan and Willa supported all of them, proud of the people their children were becoming. And as they watched their family grow and flourish, they knew that everything they had built would continue long after they were gone. On a crisp autumn evening in 1902, Nathan and Willa returned once again to the place where they had first met. They were both in their 40s now, their hair streaked with gray, their faces lined with years of laughter and sorrow and everything in between. But they still held hands like young lovers, still looked at each other with the same wonder and affection. 20 years since that day," Nathan said, looking at the spot where the trap had been. 20 years since you found that pup and I found you." "Best day of my life," Willa said simply. "Even though I did not know it at the time." "Mine too," Nathan agreed. He reached into his pocket and pulled out something small, holding it out to her. "I brought you something." Willa took the object carefully. It was a small carving, beautifully detailed, of a wolf with its head thrown back as if howling at the moon. "Nathan, it is beautiful. Did you make this?" He nodded, looking almost shy. "Been working on it for months. I wanted to give you something to remember Silver by. To remember where we started." Willa clutched the carving to her chest, overwhelmed with love for this man who, after 20 years, still found ways to surprise her. "I will treasure it always," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Just like I treasure you." They stood together as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. A cool breeze carried the scent of pine and earth, and somewhere in the distance, a wolf howled, the sound wild and beautiful and free. "You think that is him?" Willa asked softly. "Do you think Silver is still out there?" "Maybe," Nathan said. "Or maybe it is his children or his children's children. Does it matter?" Willa thought about it, then shook her head. "No, what matters is that he lived, that we helped him live." that our lives were better because he was in them, even for just a little while. Just like our lives are better because we found each other, Nathan said, turning her to face him. Just like everything is better when we are together. Willa reached up and kissed him, pouring 20 years of love into that single gesture. When they pulled apart, both smiling, she said, "Take me home, Cowboy. Our family is waiting." "Our family," Nathan repeated, his smile brilliant. "I never get tired of hearing that." They walked back to their horses, hand in hand, leaving the place where their story began but carrying it with them in their hearts. Behind them, the sun dipped below the horizon, and the first stars began to appear. And on the ridge above, a wolf watched them go before turning and disappearing into the gathering darkness, alive and strong and wild. The years that followed were full and rich. Thomas and Emma had 4 children of their own, filling the ranch with the next generation. James returned from university with his medical degree and opened a practice in town. But he visited the ranch often, bringing tales of the people he helped and the lives he saved. Rose completed her studies and became one of the first female veterinarians in the Montana Territory. Fierce and brilliant and unstoppable, Nathan and Willa became grandparents many times over, and they loved every minute of it. They spoiled their grandchildren shamelessly, teaching them to ride and rope, to read and heal, to love the land and respect the animals that shared it. They told stories around the fire about the old days, about Silver the wolf pup and the winter that changed everything. And through it all, through every joy and sorrow, every triumph and setback, Nathan and Willa remained each other's constant. They still stole kisses in the barn, still held hands at the dinner table, still found reasons to make each other laugh every single day. The passion of their early days had evolved into something deeper, something that sustained them through everything life threw their way. On their 30th anniversary, their children threw them another party, even bigger than the first. The ranch was packed with family and friends, with people whose lives had been touched by Nathan and Willa's kindness and generosity over the years. There was music and dancing, food and laughter, and more love than could possibly be contained in one place. As the evening wore on, Willa found herself standing at the edge of the celebration, watching the scene before her with a full heart. 3 decades of marriage, 3 children, more grandchildren than she could count on 2 hands, and a love that had only grown stronger with time. It was more than she had ever dreamed possible during those lonely years after her father's death. Nathan appeared at her side, slipping an arm around her waist. "Happy?" he asked, though the answer was written all over her face. "Beyond happy," Willa said. "I never imagined my life could be this full, this beautiful, and it is all because of you." "No," Nathan said firmly. "It is because of us, because we chose each other and kept choosing each other every single day for 30 years. That is what made this life possible." Willa turned in his arms, looking up at the man who had been her partner, her lover, her best friend for 3 decades. He was 51 now, his dark hair mostly gray, his face deeply lined. But his green eyes were just as clear and kind as they had been the day they met, and when he smiled at her, she still felt like the luckiest woman in the world. "I love you, Nathan Lawson," she said. "I will love you for whatever years we have left, and I will love you beyond that." "And I love you, Willa Lawson," Nathan replied. "You are the best thing that ever happened to me. You and Silver and this crazy, wonderful life we built together." They kissed as their children and grandchildren cheered, as the stars wheeled overhead and the mountains stood eternal in the distance. And in that perfect moment, Willa knew that every hardship she had endured, every lonely night and difficult day, had been worth it to arrive at this place, with this man, surrounded by this love. The Montana Territory continued to change around them. It became a state in 1889, bringing new people and new opportunities. The Wild West they had known was slowly being tamed, replaced by towns and railroads and the march of progress. But on their ranch, high in the mountains, Nathan and Willa maintained a piece of that wild freedom, a place where wolves could still howl and love could still flourish. They grew old together gracefully, their bodies slowing but their spirits remaining vibrant. Nathan's hands became gnarled with arthritis, but they were still gentle when he touched her. Willa's dark hair turned silver, but she was still beautiful to him, more so even than the young woman he had first fallen in love with. In the winter of 1912, 30 years after they first met, Nathan fell ill with pneumonia. Willa nursed him with the same fierce determination she had once used to save a dying wolf pup, refusing to accept that this might be the end. She sat by his bedside day and night, holding his hand, reading to him from his favorite books, reminding him of all the reasons he needed to fight. And fight he did, pulling through against all odds, growing stronger as winter turned to spring. When he was finally well enough to leave the bed, Willa helped him to the porch, wrapping him in blankets against the cool spring air. "You scared me," she said, her voice shaking. "I thought I was going to lose you." Nathan squeezed her hand, his grip still weak but determined. "You are not getting rid of me that easily. I promised you forever, and I meant it." "Forever," Willa repeated, and the word felt like a vow renewed. They had 5 more good years together after that. 5 years of watching their grandchildren grow, of celebrating more weddings and births, of tending the ranch they had built together. 5 years of love and laughter and the quiet contentment that comes from a life well lived. On a summer evening in 1917, they sat together on their porch as they had done countless times before. The sun was setting in a blaze of color, and somewhere in the distance, a wolf howled, the sound echoing through the mountains they both loved. "You ever regret it?" Nathan asked suddenly. "Staying out here instead of going back east where things were easier?" Willa looked at him in surprise. "Not for a single moment. This is where I belong. Where we belong. This wild, beautiful, difficult place is home." Nathan smiled, that same brilliant smile that had captured her heart 35 years ago. "Good, because I cannot imagine having lived this life with anyone else." "Nor can I," Willa said softly. As the stars began to appear and the night settled around them, they sat in comfortable silence, holding hands as they had since the beginning. The wolf howled again, and Nathan turned to her with wonder in his eyes. "You know what I think," he said. "I think somewhere out there Silver had pups. And those pups had pups, and maybe that wolf we are hearing is one of them, alive and free because we chose to help instead of walking away." "I like that thought," Willa said, her eyes misty. "I like thinking that our choice to save one small life rippled outward, creating more life, more beauty." "That is what love does," Nathan said. "It ripples outward, touching everyone and everything around it. We saved Silver, and in saving him, we found each other. We built this family, this life, and all of it will continue long after we are gone, rippling forward into the future." Willa rested her head on his shoulder, breathing in the familiar scent of him, feeling the steady beat of his heart. "What a beautiful legacy," she whispered. "What a beautiful life," Nathan replied. They sat together as the darkness deepened, and the stars multiplied overhead. 2 souls who had found each other in the most unlikely of circumstances and built something extraordinary together. And when the wolf howled one last time, they both smiled, knowing that somewhere out there wild things were living and loving and surviving, just as they had done for 35 remarkable years. The story of Nathan and Willa Lawson became legend in those mountains. Their children told it to their children, who told it to their children in turn. The story of how a wolf pup brought two lonely souls together and how their love had created a dynasty that lasted for generations. The ranch remained in the family for over 100 years, a testament to the life they built together. And sometimes, on clear nights when the moon was full, people claimed they could see wolves on the ridge above the old Lawson ranch, and they would remember the story of Silver and the love he inspired. They would remember that sometimes the smallest acts of kindness can change the course of entire lives, creating ripples that echo through time. But Nathan and Willa knew the truth even more deeply. They knew that love, real love, was worth fighting for, worth staying for, worth building a life around. And as they lived out their final years together, surrounded by the family they had created and the land they had loved, they knew they had gotten it right. In the end, Nathan passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 73, with Willa holding his hand. She followed him less than a year later, unable and unwilling to live without her other half. They were buried side by side on a hill overlooking their ranch, with a simple stone marker that read, "Together in life, together in death, forever in love." And on the day of Willa's funeral, as the family gathered to say goodbye, a wolf appeared on the ridge above the cemetery. It sat watching for a long moment, its head tilted as if listening to the words being spoken. Then it threw back its head and howled, a long, mournful sound that seemed to carry both grief and celebration. No one could say for certain if it was a descendant of Silver or just a wild wolf passing through. But Rose, now an old woman herself, smiled through her tears and said, "He came to say goodbye, to thank them one last time for giving him a chance." And perhaps she was right. Perhaps in the mysterious way of wild things, the wolves remembered, or perhaps it was simply a beautiful coincidence. Either way, it felt like a fitting end to a love story that had started with blood in the snow and a cowboy stubborn enough to help a stranger save a dying pup. The legacy of Nathan and Willa Lawson lived on through their descendants, through the ranch they built, through the lives they touched, and the love they shared. And sometimes, when the wind blew just right through the Montana mountains, it seemed to carry whispers of their story, reminding anyone who would listen that love, true love, was the wildest and most beautiful thing of all.